I don't know about you guys, but I think that sand at the beginning of the movie, some of the most satisfying shit I have ever laid my eyes on. I just wanted to run my hands through all that sand.
You know what I was thinking about when I was
colorful sand.
When I was looking at that sand?
What?
I was like, you know what would suck?
What?
If someone were
to Scorsese.
De Niro.
And Joe Pesci. Anyway, so
that would have sucked if someone did that on the sand. But it would have been cool if they said Scorsese, De Niro, Joe Pesci in the movie.
I wish they would have. That would have been a very memorable
honestly
choice,
recast,
especially in a Kundun type movie.
Yeah, recast the Dalai Lama as Joe Pesci.
That would have been incredible.
Perfect.
De-aging technology, every age.
The fucking Chinese.
We need somebody to
Joe Pesci for Trump in the biopic.
We need somebody to deep fake Joe Pesci into Kundun now. Every age.
The Chronic Canon has requested it. You must. Oh, and if you didn't know, this is the Chronic Canon.
Oh, hello. I'm Jesse.
I'm Frank.
I'm Brandon.
And
this is a podcast.
Yeah.
Yeah, we smoking movies, talking weed.
Good.
We're live in our ears, but not in yours.
Mm-hmm. Correct. And if you don't like the movie Heat from 1995,
get the fuck out.
Leave.
You gotta go.
It's okay if you've never seen it, but if you actively dislike it,
you gotta get out.
We're just saving you time, to be honest.
You really wouldn't like the podcast if you.
It comes up. Yeah. I'm pretty sure every episode, not planned. It always organically comes
outside
up.
Of the introduction at the front.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Oh,
like,
yes.
It gets brought up somehow. Every episode, I'm just like, how did we did it, though.
It's the ultimate movie. My brother called me the other day and was just like, hey, so I got extra Heat poster by accident. Do you want it? And I was like, is that a question?
Like, why would you ask?
It's like 24 by 36. I was like, good, I got a frame for that.
I already got a frame.
It's an essential
What do you mean? Get the fuck out of my face.
We are heatness as far as religion goes, actually.
Heatness, for sure.
What do we hum? What's our hymn? If we're heating this, what's the Moby version of a New Dawn?
What's that? How do you,
I got. That's definitely not it. That sounds
Halo.
more like Halo is.
Oh,
Jesus Christ! No, whatever that song at the end.
No, it's the New Dawn
is.
Fades when he's driving to De Niro on the road.
No.
Oh, you mean the ones like do 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 do?
Where it's literally like called
holding
like
hands.
the eyes of God or something.
When you said Heat was a comedy on whatever the last episode was, you're not wrong. That movie is a bit
that
hysterical.
song that plays at the end is called "God Moving Over the Face of the Waters."
Oh no,
Moby, man.
Michael Mann is so.
We
good.
love you, Moby,
and Michael Mann,
and Michael Mann, yeah. And we hope you do too.
You know who else we love?
Oh, come
Martin
on.
Scorsese.
Yeah, that's
well,
true.
we're a big
Martin
fan.
Scorsese, more specifically.
Yes. That's we
Italian-American director, you know. Maybe you've heard of him.
I mean, I
if
assume...
not, email us at chroniccanon@gmail.com.
Or follow us on Twitter and direct message us there at Chronic Canon.
Yes.
I assume anybody listening to this episode knows who Martin Scorsese is, because I don't think that there's just a base of random Kundun fans.
Well,
let's
start
start here.
For podcasts about the Dalai Lama.
That's true, but I don't think they... Well...
If you're looking for a podcast about the Dalai Lama, then I'm sorry, bro.
Yeah,
they call him Kundun, and Kundun means ocean of knowledge or ocean of wisdom. I think it's one of the two. Please fact check me on that.
No. Kundun means presence.
Is it Dalai Lama means ocean of wisdom or ocean of...
I think
something means ocean of wisdom or ocean of...
I thought it was ocean
knowledge.
of love or compassion.
Or ocean
and
of
that was
compassion.
like who he was. Big master. Ocean master.
Ocean master.
That's like what it
That's
translates to.
That's a DC villain.
So he's a
That's
waterbender,
Aquaman.
too.
That's Aquaman's arch nemesis, Ocean Master.
I thought you were about to say Ocean Man.
That's
what
what
I
thought. Because we're bad. But I don't... Yeah, I think you're right, though. Like,
Yeah,
it's
we'll go with
wisdom.
Ocean of Wisdom as opposed to Ocean Master or Big Master.
We won't
or
ponder
Big
the
Ocean.
point too long. Remember, you can email us at thechroniccanon@gmail.com or follow us on Twitter at Chronic Canon to give us the info yourself if you got it. So
Yeah,
if you're a Dalai
pass it
Lama
our
expert,
way. We need some Dalai Lama experts.
if you think
to
you
give us
know
some
more than
information.
Martin Scorsese,
Well, here's a question I have for you guys, because going into this movie, I really knew virtually nothing about the Dalai Lama. Like, I had to have a brief refresher, as to like who exactly the Dalai Lama was and what his position was in Tibet. And I knew he was exiled from Tibet and China hated him, but that's all I had like in the noggin about him and his history. And so, and then obviously, like, I actually didn't remember that he was like a reincarnated soul that passes between people, and that there is somebody who is assigned at a certain age to select a new Dalai Lama called the Panchen Lama. And the Dalai Lama selects the Panchen Lama as a young boy, and then that person grows up after the current Dalai Lama is dead and finds the new one. And it's a cycle that continues until the end of time. But at this point in history, apparently, the Dalai Lama has claimed that this may be the last form he takes on this earth, which I think is an interesting point, since the Chinese government is essentially implementing their own Panchen Lama, given that they apparently kidnapped him. The boy that the real Dalai Lama picked as the Panchen Lama 20 years ago.
Yeah, it's just pretty wild. I had no idea about the political stuff. I was definitely at least a little familiar with like the spiritual religious aspect. Like I knew that.
No, he was a peaceful sort of icon.
And I knew, that he was sort of like a figurehead. I didn't know that he actually ran the country for a time. Well, I didn't know that the Dalai Lama's job was to run Tibet, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I just knew that he was important to the country and important to the religion of Buddhism.
Yeah. Frank, what about you?
I'm basically the same thing, like between both of you.
Between the bits of knowledge that we gave out?
Yeah, I knew that he was a reincarnated being, and I remember knowing the object thing. Like, it's if you pick the same objects to prove that you're the rebirth or whatever. And then
Avatar.
Yeah. And then what's the other thing I knew? Just that that he was exiled and stuff.
Right.
I didn't know much of the political things. I knew that the Chinese government took over Tibet, and it's always been a big thing.
Yeah.
That like they just have it now.
Well, it's pretty insane how they're just sort of taking it out from under them. Like it's interesting too how that is like the direct like line between church and state like coming to a head.
Mm-hmm.
It's because the Dalai Lama is a man of peace.
Right.
And
he seems like a very sweet man in interviews and stuff that I see with him.
But he's also a political leader, technically.
Yes.
Yeah.
A political religious leader.
A political religious leader who's been groomed from birth.
Yeah.
To be the way he is.
Also, speaking of not knowing much about the Dalai Lama, I don't know much about Buddhism either, other than the fact that it is generally known as the most peaceful of religions, or that it is, more of a peaceful religion.
Aren't they a specific set of Buddhism, like that they're like Tibetan Buddhism,
Tibetan
opposed
monks.
to just like, I don't know, the overarching Buddhism. Like I think that there are differences.
There are definitely different forms.
Man, we probably should have looked this stuff up before.
I have no idea. But see, this leads me to another point, which was how do we feel Scorsese did in teaching us anything about the Dalai Lama? Because personally, I don't feel like I got more than like the broad scope of who the Dalai Lama, at least the current Dalai Lama, is, and how he fits in with the whole religion and state of the Tibetan government and whatnot. But I don't think the movie necessarily dips into too much detail, but I don't think it's necessarily trying to. And I think that the 2 hour, 15-minute length kind of restricts any possible attempt at going deeper with the material. Yeah?
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like I, left with more knowledge about the fucking Dalai Lama than I came into.
Definitely.
I mean, certainly true. Yeah.
And I feel like if someone was okay, can you explain what's going on with the Dalai Lama? I feel like I could give them a rundown.
I mean,
it's pretty accurate.
It goes over the broadness of what he does, what he means,
the process of how he's chosen.
And then I feel like beyond that, it's more about like specifics to his life for that 20-year period or whatever.
Once he becomes the main actor who plays him throughout the latter half of the movie.
Well, even before then, I think the movie at the end of the day is kind of a standard biopic.
Yeah.
Like when it feels like that's first and foremost telling the Dalai Lama's story, opposed to like getting into like specifics of Buddhism or previous Dalai Lamas or like the state of the world other than what's necessary for plot.
Oh, so that's like the finer details that you got. That was going to be my question, is what finer details do you guys think that it's lacking that you would have liked for them to touch upon?
Well, I mean,
But that's
this is
I can't know. I just felt like I didn't get to know the character very well. You know,
It's.
like
I think it is. It makes sense too. I think it is a very similar movie to Last Temptation, like in the way that it's like structured and goes about telling its story. And I just think we're extra familiar with the story of Jesus and not with the story of the Dalai Lama,
which
and
made me more intrigued in seeing where
of
this
course,
went.
and I do like this more. Spoiler, but I think that if we were more familiar, we might feel the exact same way. So, and then I pause and think about like, what do I wish it did different? But like, that's not necessarily the movie's job to inform me more about Buddhism or like the way that the society evolved to get to the point it's at, or
Right.
to focus on external factors like the Chinese government even more, which is like all the stuff that I wanted to know, because I think as a like quote unquote character, which at the end of the day, like this is a movie character,
Yeah.
I think he's like, once he got to the main actor, like you were saying, like it felt like the movie just like locked in, and it was just like on its trajectory.
It was just
And I
following the
wasn't-
beats of history and using the actor to carry
Yeah.
that out.
And
Which,
that
I mean,
doesn't
important to
enthrall
note-
me as much.
Important to note here at the front that this is really the first movie in which Scorsese has recruited all non-actors to play all the key roles in the film, at the very least.
Everything's pretty good.
I think so for the script and what it is that they're doing. I think it all works and
Yeah.
it fits in with the tone that Scorsese's setting up for sure.
I can't think of like anybody that was like bad.
Well, the only times that I was ever like, oof.
I mean, all children are bad actors, in my opinion.
I mean, I thought that they were pretty good.
I
One of the younger ones wasn't the
I
best.
thought the opening scene with all of them at the table eating was a little clunky.
but I felt like that was more the script than the actors.
Right. But I mean, that's what I'm saying is like you need really good dialogue if you're going to have actors that are not equipped to, process something that isn't as meaty of a line or something like that into something that can be projected as more realistic or casual, as you would say in real life or something like that. Like you could tell that
Definitely.
these were performances like at the front. But I think as the movie went on, I became adjusted to that. And it was easier for me to process all the other scenes that followed. And I think as the movie goes on, it becomes more clinical. Because at the beginning, I think with the choosing of the Dalai Lama and the whole process of figuring out whether or not this little boy that we're introduced to is or isn't the Dalai Lama is kind of the mystical, childlike element of the movie that Frank sort of had said to kind of go to a point that you had mentioned, which I apologize for bringing it up. But Hugo being the movie that probably is closest to this, or at least this first little part of the movie that Scorsese will make later.
Yeah. Yeah, probably a mix of Hugo and Last Temptation.
Because I think
is
there is
this.
the sense of childlike wonder at the front, even in his like, "Who am I?" question.
Yeah, and that goes on for a little while, like even into the second and third actors. It's not only in the first 20 minutes, because they get him on the road to Potala Palace in Lhasa.
I just know that it was 1939 when he left.
Mm.
It was
Which
2
is
years
2 years.
after he found out he was the Dalai Lama.
Which I
Crazy
believe
to
he's
think that's all
supposed to.
during
Well, I don't
World
think
War
he knew
II.
I don't think they told him
Yeah.
he was the Dalai Lama yet until like he was about to leave. I think
I thought they did in that scene.
they do.
I don't remember. Man, I watched this. We did one of our atypical watchings where we did not watch together, and I watched quite a few days before Jesse and Brandon did.
Back in the day, we used to take a weekend between watchings. Back in the day,
Yeah.
but now I feel like we have been doing them like every 4 or 5 days.
Yeah. So I don't know. It doesn't feel fresh.
But
to
I
know
also
the
don't think
details.
it's a movie that is special enough to stick with you in that way. Like,
Ouch.
hey, I'm sorry. Like,
Well, no, it just hurts.
Well-
I do apologize about that.
Why?
'Cause
Why does it hurt?
I like it, and I do think that I have
I like
this
it.
sort of I know you guys don't dislike it. I have this problem. If you don't love it, it hurts me.
Yeah, I have this problem too.
Goodfellas is a good movie. Get off my back, dude.
Come and see. Like, what are we even talking about?
All right.
4 stars.
Oh my God, what do you want from me?
5.
I like. Oh, I like this good movie.
All right. Anyway.
But I do think I definitely have a little bit of a bias towards Eastern culture and stuff because it's always something that's intrigued me. So any sort of history or anything that I can learn about it is always cool because I feel like I've never dove into it in the conventional way. Like it's always like, oh shit, like oh now I just know this fact about like China. Oh now I just know the history of Japan in 9 minutes somewhat. That's pretty cool. And it's just like things like that. Like I've always been very interested in the culture. I like the video games, I like their shows, I like their TV. So learning about the more religious aspect, which is something that I've never been too keen on because like I don't know, a lot of the media that I intake doesn't necessarily touch on like religion too much as opposed to like teenagers with superpowers. But so I thought it was really interesting because I just felt like I was learning a lot, not only about who the Dalai Lama is, but also just about like Tibet and like the state of the East right now. Not right now, but back then. So it's something that like it piqued my interest. I was like, this is fucking dope. Like I didn't know any of this. Like this is stuff that I thought, should be like in world history. Like I didn't learn about this.
I agree with all that though. But then I always come back to the argument of like, well then shouldn't I just be reading a book or something instead of getting like an abridged 2-hour version?
But you didn't read the book, you watched the movie.
I know, because we're doing Martin Scorsese.
Well, I'm saying like it exists. Like, I feel like if you want to learn about the Dalai Lama, you would have done those things. But when something like this falls in your lap and you get to learn, it's cool.
I don't disagree. I guess at some point...
I'm not saying it's like, like if you want to learn about the Dalai Lama, watch Kundun. But if you're fucking on a movie series where you have to watch all the movies by a certain director, and then you happen upon a movie that's about the Dalai Lama and you get to learn about him a little bit, you're like, huh. I mean, I still know it's a Scorsese movie, so I'm not taking everything to heart, but I do appreciate that, there was discussions with the actual Dalai Lama. So I think, any sort of problems that I have with the Dalai Lama would be with, like, who he is as in real life as opposed to, like, how he's depicted in a movie.
Yeah, so what's the deal with that? Because you mentioned that this whole process of getting Kundun made was because somebody had interviewed the Dalai Lama, wrote a screenplay, and then that screenplay was offered to Scorsese? Or specifically pitched to him?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like they were like, you are the one we want to direct this movie.
Melissa Matheson was the writer, and she's most known for E.T. and has never collaborated with Scorsese outside of Kundun.
Interesting.
But I think it was literally
another one of the movie brats.
Yes, she's worked with Spielberg twice. She wrote the BFG. It looks like as well.
Oh shit! Okay,
nice.
Oh, is she dead? She did. She is dead.
Rip.
Oh,
she died in 2015.
Rip.
I just read that the BFG was a posthumous
a posthumously produced film
release for her specifically. And I'm 99% sure I read, now I can't find it again, that specifically it was because of Last Temptation of Christ. And it's like portrayals of viewing him as a man and treating it like a story. And even though it's like real, like with Kundun, at least, he would still treat it as
Sneak this on Jesus.
He would treat it. Well, he's alive, so it's like I know for sure that's
all right. Facts.
Hey, Brandon and I got into a whole ass argument yesterday about how I was like, I don't believe
I was
Jesus
kind of playing
was the
devil's
quote,
advocate.
Son of God, but I do believe that Jesus was a real person. And he was like, I don't believe in Jesus. Period.
I was in part playing devil's advocate because we don't know, and I said that it's a possibility that he's literally just an amalgamation of a bunch of different people doing different kind things that have touched the hearts of many. It's like there's no way that like you feed 500 people and they're not all going to leave with the same story.
Yeah, that's very true. I mean, they addressed that in Last Temptation, where it was just like, no, I'm still alive, and he's like, it doesn't matter.
Because if you went up there and said you are Jesus, they'd just kill you, probably.
Right. So and that's the brilliant nature of the Dalai Lama and his existence, is that you have your Jesus figure forever present. Like it's not the waiting for the second coming or the fear of eventual judgment. Like you have which like I guess is technically supposed to be the Pope, but that feels so haphazardly chosen and like isn't. And even though they have like more control in the world, doesn't feel the same like intelligent way of like, yeah, that guy's a representation, where this is literally just like, nope, this is the same spiritual being literally reborn in front of us. So your guy is always there and he's always watching. And it's like, oh, damn.
What I was
like
saying,
the president of your country. It's like, imagine if Jesus Christ ran for president.
And if you grab him from birth, you then have like, you're just teaching him the teachings from while his brain is still a sponge. And that person is going to end up exuding all the qualities that you are trying to promote for your religion. And it's like,
I will say
it's
this.
smart.
I
It's
don't
just
know
like
if
a
the
good
movie
strategy.
is accurate or not in this being truly historically how this went down. But in the
From what I
process of the
understand, it
Panchen
is.
Lama or whoever that was showing up and placing all the items in front of the child Dalai Lama and saying, pick your items, which then Brandon even clarified. I just assumed that that would have been all the last Dalai Lama's items that they were like putting out. Not all, because obviously there'd probably be plans to like fool this child if like the child picked that and they'd go, definitely not the Dalai Lama because that's not his. But Brandon was saying that the items on the table probably weren't just the last Dalai Lamas, but even the Dalai Lama before that, and the
Mhm.
Dalai Lama before that. Because
good
in
call.
theory, he would be all of those people.
Yeah, to be honest, no.
And if he actually chose all those items positively and only the items that were picked by the Dalai Lama,
there's something to it.
that's
My thing-
nuts.
my
that's
thing
crazy.
is-
But
what
I
I-
don't know if that's actually true.
What I was talking about with Jesse after we
Believe
watched it,
is.
because it didn't take long for us to be like, man, isn't that kind of like just picking the dude and then like running with the dude for the whole time?
Mhm.
But then I was like, you know what though? If it really was like, if it was truly just like a political thing, a thing for control, then there wouldn't be the process of finding him. Like it took them 4 years to find
I agree.
the current Dalai Lama, and that's 4 years without a leader.
Yeah, and even
without
think
your-
about how the current Dalai Lama's like Panchen Lama that he chose is missing, and he's like, well, if we don't have him, then it's no one.
No, he's saying if he doesn't feel like another Panchen Lama exists, then he will end the reincarnation.
So wait, he's
that's
saying
my
there's a
interpretation.
possibility that because he was like
Well, he
taken
keeps saying
by the
I don't-
Chinese
he
government,
just-
because if they
he
killed him, then
keeps
he would be
saying-
reincarnated.
He
again.
keeps saying maybe. He has not definitively said he is the last Dalai Lama. And I mean,
no, he's not
obviously
saying
you don't want to.
definitively, But if
but-
but if the Chinese government thwarts him and fucking chooses their own, which they already have, they've chosen their own Panchen Lama. So when that kid grows up, that kid's going to look
Yeah,
for the next
But
Dalai
the
Lama.
Dalai Lama is alive, and he
But once
already
that Dalai Lama
renounced.
dies,
Yeah, but but that's just like that's the Chinese use for like control and
Right.
stuff.
Yeah,
now,
but
now
whatever-
you're dipping towards what you were just talking
like,
about.
but I'm talking about the reality of like the Dalai Lama and Buddhism. Like the Dalai Lama will cease to exist no matter what fake thing is appointed.
I do want to clarify that. Like,
so one day the lineage will stop
That's what the Dalai Lama is saying.
by saying that he's going to be the last one.
Yeah.
Okay, interesting that he would know that.
Well, I mean, if anyone's going to
But
be
I
the
guess if he's a
authority, it's
deity,
him.
he's a deity.
Well, I don't think he's supposed to be a deity, but he certainly is treated like one.
Well, I mean, if he's is he not the equivalent of Christ,
I mean,
like to the Buddhist religion?
yes, basically, if you're going one for one.
Well, more that's the only reason why I say that, because I think, well, is Christ looked on as a deity now?
Now,
Okay,
I guess,
but not at the time.
but not at the time. But this
I
is-
apologize for my ignorance to anyone listening who is religious.
Hey, we're trying to learn, all right, guys?
Yes.
Don't
Yeah.
come on.
We're
I am
trying to
not.
talk about it,
That's
and
the
I
only
really,
reason I am so dumb.
I do think that there is more honesty and earnestness behind it for sure. But like, you could argue that if you did that to enough children, eventually you would find one who picks all the right things. And then, like, I know it's more than that. I know that's not the only aspect that led them to doing that. And there's something to it. And there is, like, I believe in like an inexplicable connection and people being drawn to each other, and you can feel that feeling, whatever. But like, you know, how far does it go?
Yeah.
And at some point it doesn't matter. It's just, I think we're all looking for something to help wade through the chaoticness of existence, and whatever
Yes.
you need to do to get through it is cool. And I mean, respect to Buddhism, because I think they got a lot more figured out than most people.
Yeah, my whole thing, or not whole thing, but a thing that I certainly do appreciate, and maybe it is because I don't know enough about what
that's
they've
true.
done in their practices, but I do appreciate, you know, that there is this being with all this power, and you know, the Crusades didn't happen by the fucking Buddhist monks or you know the Dalai Lama. Like religion is power to them, but it seems like at least if he's drunk with it, it's for his, like he's drunk with it like himself. He's not using it against the people,
Yeah.
you know. And I think the movie does sort of depict that when they're like, we have 5,000 soldiers, like we can fight, and he's like,
No.
why would we fight?
Also, 5,000 is not that many.
No,
It's so funny.
he went so many, and I was like, ooh, buddy, you have
Yeah.
not seen China, have you?
No. But I mean, I guess that's definitely more so what I mean. It's
So it's like even
it's
no
for
matter
living
how
a good life.
Yeah,
Like, you
like-
can't look at the things that they teach and interpret it incorrectly from like that base level. Like, you can definitely anybody, like we even just started to like throw arguments against reincarnation or like the true enlightened being, or is that just like some essence of brainwashing? But like whatever, it's better than a lot of other things. There's no hate in it. It's all
Yeah.
about trying to think about the effects of your life beyond your life.
Yes.
And it's all about like treating everything equally, like in a very basic understanding. But I am far from being an expert. But you know, if I had to pick a religion, I'd probably walk my way over. Be like, what are you guys doing?
I think any sort of like adversity or disdain or even just like lack of credibility would be how the American culture has sort of tried to adapt Buddhism and like just like the whole Zen thing that we try to have going on. And I feel like a lot of Americans like view of what Buddhism or even just more peaceful religions that are founded in the East is like sort of skewed by how Americans depict those things. And so it's like maybe, you know, watching something like Kundun where it's still an American scope, but it's at least like, to me, seems like the most detached an American could be while still making it an American movie.
I think it was smart getting Scorsese. Like I do. I think he's an intelligent, respectful human being, which is like what
Kundun is definitely proof of that too.
Yeah, I think it is irritating, even though I threw the lobs against him last week. But like, it is irritating that people don't give Marty more benefit of a doubt, and not just because like we want to. It's because like he's proven time and time again, like his actual thoughtfulness into what he's doing as a filmmaker. You know,
Right.
He cares.
Like, I mean, it adds to the authenticity of the experience.
And
so.
now I'm sitting here wondering, like, why didn't I like this more? Because I was pretty fucking with it. Like the first 50 minutes, I was like, this fucks. Like I know it's a movie about the Dalai Lama, but I thought it was weird, like surprisingly weird, like the way it's made, like Philip Glass's score.
Philip
I was
Glass's
like,
score is so crazy, but it's very Philip Glass.
yeah, I was like, is this the worst thing ever, or is it perfect?
Like
And-
all the synth like strings and all that shit. It was odd.
and Deacon's
cinematography, the one collaboration that he has with Roger Deakins.
I mean, it looks nice, but there are some shots where I'm like, what the fuck?
No, man, there's
Like
one
literally,
shot.
what the fuck?
There's one shot in this movie that I'm like, that's an all-timer Sessi shot. Like
Which one?
The body.
The
The
bodies?
red.
Yeah,
The
by the
red.
way,
You're right.
this is a spoiler-filled podcast. We
Oh, yeah.
haven't said that at all. But
Hey,
you
man,
know,
we're 30
we
minutes
always
in.
say it late, so it's fine.
And if this is your first time, welcome. Thank you. Kundun?
Yeah,
Kundun.
cool,
Yeah,
interesting.
Yeah, tell us why.
Interesting start, but hey,
Yeah.
we've been talking.
We've been
good.
on a roll with Sessi for what? This is our 16th Sessi episode.
Yes,
I wanna
and we've
say-
had 2 offshoots.
No
so-
shit.
so
Okay,
we've
well,
been-
yeah. So we've been on the
this is-
Sessi train for 18
But
weeks.
this is the 18th episode of the Chronic Canon.
And next week we're gonna bring out the dead. But for
Yes.
now, we are digging the Kundun.
I think Deacon's cinematography is very good, but they wait. I already said this. I think that
We were talking about the shot. Yes, the
Oh,
shot.
the
of
bodies.
Well, the body shot is
that's insane.
the craziest thing, as well as that
The
like,
eyeball
the
through
eyeball
the-
on the telescope. Yeah,
That was
I loved
cool,
it.
too.
Loved it. Loved it.
But
loved
like
it.
it's
The
so it's
landscape
like
shots are great in this too. Like the opening shot. It
yeah.
reminded me almost of something like There Will Be Blood or something of that nature.
I feel like I almost thought that too.
Yeah, like a
And-
John Huston, or not John Ford shot.
I like definitely think he's doing interesting things, but even in that, like it's pretty like restraint for a lot of it, which is
Yeah.
appropriate.
It's not like crazy Sessi.
No,
Even
but
I
it's,
can notice
it's
that.
weird though. Like, and I almost think in the straightforwardness sometimes I'm like, this feels weird.
It's restrained, but it's still stylish in the way
Yeah.
that only Sessi
Which
does.
maybe
it.
that's why I think
I
it's
think
weird.
the aerial shots are
Conflicting.
abundant in this, like where the camera's traversing overhead the scenes
Those are
and
always
looking
cool.
looking over everything. Like obviously those sand shots are gorgeous. Like
Mhm.
the lenses that they're using must be so goddamn long, like to capture like those really tight close-ups of all the particles of sand
Mhm.
falling.
I just wondering where, like, I'm trying to recollect. Like, at just some point, I felt myself starting to check out, and then by the end, I felt like I was totally checked out. But I also was like, I kind of want to buy the Blu-ray because it's not easily accessible. Did you
Right.
guys watch it on YouTube too?
We
Yes.
did.
So we watched it. It's
The
on
quality
YouTube.
was decent enough
Yeah.
for me to get through it, but I definitely wanted to see this in high
I
definition.
feel like I want to buy the Blu-ray not just because of that, but also because I want to see it again. Like, I feel like maybe there is more. I think it's
Well,
just the way
we-
biopics
we
go.
taled about this
They make me
like
lose
earlier in the
steam.
podcast, but I will say that the rewatch value worries me.
Yeah,
Because I think that the idea of this being so strong and so strong for me being a 3.5 out of 5, which is still solid rating in my book. I suppose, in my book. Death Proof, sorry.
Okay, I was like, I don't know what you're doing.
But I'm going to put you in my book. It's Kurt Russell doing John Wayne again. But it was teaching me things about the Dalai Lama, and that was holding my interest and engaging me and wanting to keep going with the story, and seeing the way that Scorsese was applying his style to the movie was fascinating to me. And like you said, the elements that operated within that, like Deacon cinematography. Thelma's very subtle here. She's not going ham on the editing. I don't even remember too many moments where I thought the editing like stood out. Where I was like, oh, this is a very well edited scene.
It's probably
Everything
her
is
most chilled job so far, actually.
probably.
Honestly.
Because
what
starting
else?
at there's Who's That Knocking at My Door, Raging Bull Through Now.
Even Who's That Knocking on My Door has more wild
No,
editing than
I
Kundun.
believe that. I'm just talking about, I'm trying to cover all the ones that she's done so far. But yeah, you're probably right. This is the most restrained that she's been, and probably even Scorsese, like so far, like stylistically too, even though, like you said, you can see the imprint of him all over it.
It's weird that this is dismissed amongst his filmography.
Yeah.
Because it makes perfect sense that he made it.
I
Like,
think
I'm
it's
like,
probably because people assume it's boring like me.
I
I
mean,
assumed that.
I think it is a
was.
little boring, honestly. As a movie, I think I am a simpleton. I being Frank,
I'm Jesse.
Brandon.
where it's like, give me the drama. Like
Well-
I want a movie experience when I watch movies. I don't want a history lesson because I will read if I want to, you know. And maybe that's just a dumb personal thing that I'm never gonna be able to get over. Who knows?
Two things. One, I think that if the movie had been longer, I would have probably liked this a lot more.
I agree.
Like the fact that he gives Casino the 3-hour treatment, but he doesn't give this the 3-hour treatment kind
And-
of surprises me almost. But then again, I almost think that may have been a studio decision. Like I imagine
Yeah.
there's a strong possibility Scorsese made a much longer movie and the studio was like, hell to the no.
I think
But I did not look up
3-hour
much about this afterward.
mobster movie is much more sellable.
With De Niro and Pesci and Sharon Stone, absolutely. The second thing being, I think this movie was made too early. I think the Dalai Lama's story continues to get more interesting into the years after Kundun was made. Like, I almost thought that the point that it leaves us off on is an odd one, but I think at the time, obviously, it was more important in the sense that the Dalai Lama's fate was still up in the air.
Mm-hmm.
Like, at the time, he was still exiled, but he was still leading Tibet at the time. But I know he's since renounced himself as leader, correct? That was in
I think
2011?
Yeah, 2011.
Wow. So that would have been how many years after Kundun?
A lot.
Like 14 years?
Yeah.
Oh, after it was made.
How old
Yes.
was I?
So
In 2011?
3, 11, 14.
I would have been
years, yes.
16,
14.
15 or
4,
16.
10, 1, 15. Or 16.
Right. But anyway,
No, actually 14 or 15.
I do think Jesse has a point when he's saying that a lot of the value does come from when you're learning about it. So that does sort of,
and that's why I
Let-
think that it's like the broad stroke thing being a problem, you know?
yeah.
Like that I feel like that's the biopic part. That it like takes the ideas of like, oh, well, this is an important event. We need this. This is an important event. We need to cover it. This is an important event. We need to cover it. Like, for instance, like, I mean, like, I think it's actually one of the best scenes in the movie, but it felt almost kind of cartoony. The scene where he meets President Mao. That's the Chinese president, correct?
Mm-hmm.
So, like,
Leader.
Like I don't know, there was something about like the scene itself was good, and like I thought that the way that it was written and everything, the way that it was performed was really good, but just I don't like the actors' makeup and stuff. Like you could so tell that it wasn't real, and
Well, I mean, I think that's the essence of
Yeah.
the Chinese government.
well, I guess if that's the idea that you're going for the look of a facade to literally get across the point that it's a facade, that's
I
great. But
think
I'm
that
not
was
totally sold on it being that.
I
the
think that's a
impetus
part of it because the Dalai Lama in that scene is believing him for a long time. And
Yes.
it's not until the end that he's just like, okay, I'm done pretending.
Yep, I'm gonna.
So I
leave now.
think it's supposed to be that like way, but he's so pure that he doesn't recognize it.
It was I really like that little tidbit in the movie because it's the first time as like really since the beginning that you see someone not like treat the Dalai Lama not like he's this ethereal being, you know, not like he's the president of your country.
Oh yeah,
except
'cause
for
he
the
doesn't
very-
fucking care about it.
Exactly. And that is that to me was very interesting to see how you know these two worlds will collide and to see how he's mostly overlooked by the president of China. How like he even when he's talking to him he's not acknowledging who the Dalai Lama is or like as a person at all. And I thought that was very interesting because it sort of set up how this relationship was going to eventually crumble like very fast. And I'm also less familiar with like conventional film tropes. I think I do have that going for me. Like, I haven't seen so many biopics that I'm like, oh, this is just hitting the beats of the biopics. I think the only movie genres in which like I could even like say those things about are definitely like superhero movies, horror movies, and just like action movies in general are usually the three genres where I'm like, you are just hitting the beats of this genre that makes it work,
Well, a
which
biopic-
will
So it's like
lessen.
the idea I think, because it's not the idea that all biopics are the same and that it's just like they hit these same beats over and over again, and the events or whatever are always like the same. It's just the idea that it's like these important chunks and like kind of brushing over them in a paragraph as opposed to like devoting a whole chapter to these events, right? And like
Yeah.
also the idea that I like the movies that focus more, and Frank has expressed this too, about movies that focus about true events that are like concise and their focus, like
Which
not
in a way this is. It picked only an early portion of his life.
yeah.
Well, it just sounds like you guys wouldn't like. You guys don't like biopics. Like you guys more like event picks, like movies about like an event as opposed to like
Well,
a person throughout history.
That's not true, because there are movies that do the job of the biopic well, like in the sense that they morph the idea of it just being a sort of flip book of events highlighting the important stuff, and that's it, instead of really getting to the core of who these people were. Like that's the thing that I think this movie almost missed, by the point that Frank says that he felt it started to wane. But I was ironically thinking that it was getting better in the second half because I was more interested in all this political shit, because I thought that this is kind of where Scorsese really tied in, and like he's done the political thing before as well as the religious thing, like, and now these worlds are literally colliding and competing against one another in a scene that almost felt like the cowboy talking to Ace Rothstein in Casino with the Mao and the Dalai Lama, but the equivalent in Kundun being something much more subtle and subdued than obviously Ace Rothstein and De Niro. But like an example of a biopic that I really, really love that like kind of takes the ideas that I was just talking about and does something creative is ironically a Schrader movie, which is Mishima, A Life in Four Chapters, which is a movie about like a Japanese author who wrote just, a lot of very personal and politically charged material, and ended up, becoming a filmmaker of sorts. And then by the end of his life ended up committing seppuku and like held, I can't remember, it was like some government official in Japan hostage, and did a big speech out in front, and like he created his own militia. He lived a crazy life. But the way that they like display the character is by taking the movie's like timeline covers the last day of his life, like throughout the the linear timeline, and then it will cut to flashbacks of his childhood and things growing up, and like his events as a famous author and whatnot, and then eventually the militia leader leading up to this final day. But then within that, there will be 4 chapters, which are sort of rundowns of his narratives that were 4 of his novels. Can't remember the names of all of them now, but the way most of the movie is comprised of these sections that are these chapters of his books, right? Well, they're trying to sum up the entire book in one short little film, but that's how they're done. They're like chapters in the movie. And by the end, you feel like you have this mosaic of this person through their work, as opposed to watching only the things that happened in their real life. You're seeing the way that their mind operated and was translated through their work, then via translated through another man's vision. But I mean, Paul Schrader being a white American is definitely not the preferred idea in my head, but he was also another person who was very respectful to not just the person and the family, but the history and all the stuff that had happened, and just Japanese culture in general at the time.
Well, that sounds like so specific to like, even just like artistry and filmmaking. And like the Dalai Lama isn't an artist; he's a dude.
Right, but I think that there are more interesting ways you could have covered this story.
I think what you're getting at is that it's not about.
It doesn't feel personal. It feels clinical. It feels like a rundown of information. I don't feel like I am getting a character. I feel like I am seeing a virtual like a PowerPoint presentation through Scorsese's lens, which is good.
But at the same time, it's only about a person. And I think that's when it becomes frustrating. It's like this whole movie is only about this person, but you don't care about the person. You just care about what happened. And I think
And I don't think it doesn't care about the person.
Yeah.
I just think that it doesn't delve as deep into it because I think
But
it's
at the
more
s-
focused on the events and things.
But
Well,
at
I
the
think
same
at the
time,
front when he's a kid it starts off that way, but I think it delves more into the political stuff by the time it reaches the second hour.
Are you talking like you would have liked to know more about like the Dalai Lama's like internal struggles with being like a deity?
See, I
Not
don't
even
know
that
how to-
necessarily.
Well, because when I look at this movie, I care about the Dalai Lama. I care about Kundun. Like I want to see. I don't want like I see that he wants the best for his people, regardless of how he was brought up. I just know that he wants good, and I care about him.
What
and I
made you
want him to
care
do good.
about him as opposed to Willem Dafoe's Jesus?
Well, because I know Jesus. I didn't know the Dalai Lama, and
So
so
you
it's
think
learning
it-
about somebody
But
as
then
opposed
why
to.
do you think the rewatch would be good?
Well, I was saying that might hurt the rewatch that you're not learning again.
Oh, I thought you were saying you were excited to rewatch it.
No, I was saying that could hurt the rewatch because a part of the excitement is like learning about something new.
Oh, well
Mm.
then never mind.
I guess what I'm thinking that is that once he's an adult, he's not growing anymore, and he's just the character. And I feel like that happened kind of early on. Like not a character, but he is who he is now. And then it just has to be that I'm interested in what's happening and not about him growing up, which is when I was the most enthralled. I was like watching this person be from day one, like you're the being. And then once he's like older and it does dive into those political things. This was even my problem with Casino. I feel like it's still surfacey. It's like, now, okay, if you're going to focus on what's happening, then, focus on what's happening. Like, I don't know. I don't know how to make this better. I don't know.
And I will
And I don't
say
know
that,
why I felt this so disengaged by the end.
I will say
um,
that I think the one problem with the performances is the lack of emotion that is displayed through these people.
But I mean, that's the Dalai Lama.
Well, but see, there are scenes in which they try to get emotion out of him, and I was going to get to that earlier in the podcast, but
In the what?
the podcast. But he like there's a couple moments where the actors are forced to like do something that would normally be a performative emotional scene. And they're generally brief moments. Like there's one specifically I can remember, like
The
a dream
dream?
sequence toward the end where he's like, "What?" and he like screams, and it's not good. Like it's bad, and it doesn't work, and I didn't feel a thing. But that's me. I don't know if that would necessarily affect everybody differently, but I think that was part of it, and the reason that I had a harder time connecting to the material on an emotional level for sure. But also, I think that, like I was saying, had the movie delved more into the personal detail and like even the relationships with his family, like when his family would come back later in the movie, I wouldn't feel this sort of warm feeling like I would normally expect to feel seeing these characters. Like you would think the Dalai Lama probably is feeling that, seeing his mother and father and all these other people that he'd lived with his whole life leading up to, this crazy existence that he lives now.
Yeah,
Because
but
it
maybe
seems like
not.
they're with him the whole time, right? Like at least as a kid and stuff, they still raise him, but they're living in whatever compound, whatever that is.
Well, I think he's allowed. I think it become like that's also a thing. I've made a couple notes about it. Just the interesting to see the sort of acknowledgement that has to happen, and it happens almost like immediately after he finds out he's the Dalai Lama in the 2-year skip, and he's like blessing all these items that people are bringing to him, and then like he sees his family, and they have like this really weird glance exchange because it's like, oh, like I was literally just picking on you. And it's like, do I
Right.
acknowledge you? Like, are we
Yes.
allowed to be cool?
Yes.
And there's a couple of scenes later where he's interacting with his family, and you can tell that they don't know how to balance this dynamic. I'm specifically talking about the scene where he sneaks away because I don't think he's staying with his family. I think they stay like in the same like monastery, but like he's tended to by the monks. Because even when he's crying in bed, he's tended to by the monk, not his mom.
Right.
But when he sneaks away to go visit them, and they redo the little bit that they do at the beginning where the dad is eating chicken and he uses the chicken grease to twist up his mustache so it's not like getting in his mouth.
Yes.
And then Kundun grabs the chicken grease and messes up his mustache again to be cute, and then the dad smacks his hand. And so they redo this bit, but now he is Kundun, he is the Dalai Lama, and like he hits him and then he looks at him and then he just like realizes like, oh, I'm not allowed to do that anymore. And he has to look at his son and go, I'm sorry, Kundun. And I was just like, that is so weird.
What
and
a
then
wild
he gets,
shift in dynamic, yeah.
And so when he gets caught by the monks too, where they're like, you can't be in here, like you gotta go, and like he gets scolded. by his family for wanting to spend time with his family. So I equated that to like the weird feelings that I would get when the family would appear, because it's like, how would you even begin to balance that sort of dynamic? Because in the end, Kundun has to treat everybody equally. If he's like only happy when his family appears, then it might inevitably make someone sad, or at least that's something that he unfortunately has to think about.
Yeah, but they don't address that in the movie.
Well,
I mean,
the scenes. They
Right,
just
but
talked
I mean,
about.
but that's what I'm saying. Had they addressed that, then I would know that. Like that's, or like for instance,
but then
like,
would it be
he's
not
a
subtle?
human. He's a
And then
human
that's
being.
the complaint against it.
Maybe, but I don't know. I think there are different ways you can handle it. But that's just suggestions from me.
Yeah,
Whether or not you like them is one thing or not.
I just don't know. Yeah, I don't know the suggestions, because like you just brought up that echoing of the two scenes. I'm like, that is smart. That is a good way to do that. You're right. I got the ideas. And you reminded me of the scene when the guy comforts him, and I was like, that is interesting. Like he is just, he's not human. So then I do feel that conflict of like, well, there probably isn't like more to know about him, because he is just this thing at some point. And it was cool to see the like pursuit of knowledge and like modernity and like wanting to be a progressive human and caring about people, like when he's watching the war footage and stuff. And I'm trying to remember what the other scene was, looking at like the maps of the world. It was a lot. There is a lot of interesting things.
It reminded me, oddly enough, it did remind me of The Fifth Element when she's relearning everything, and then all the images of war start flashing. But like the reverse, where he's trying to learn about these travesties in this war to learn. He's literally like trying to become more empathetic. Like, oh shit, like bad things are happening all over the world, not just in Tibet.
There's a couple points where he's watching movies too.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Even as a kid, they stumble upon like that old movie projector, like the hand crank one.
Yes. Talk about that when we see Hugo again.
Yeah, is that the Lumiere brothers?
I don't know if it was the Lumiere brothers.
It looked like
it looked like it, yes.
But I haven't seen it. I know it wasn't Trip to the Moon. But the there are like a weird number of Scorsese isms. Like there's the betrayal amongst his like advisors and like their sneaky things, and
where
then
he's like, why can't I see him anymore?
Right.
And
Separation of family, the little movie things.
it's interesting how he can't even know about that as a kid too.
Right. It yeah, feels very much in his wheelhouse, but
should have been 4 hours. Should have been 2 movies focusing on his or 1 movie focusing on his childhood and another movie focusing on his adult years leading up to his exile.
But it's obvious why that doesn't happen.
Yeah, but I mean, I don't think the Dalai Lama doesn't deserve that epic.
Yeah.
So I don't see why they wouldn't have done it that way. But
did the Dalai Lama like it?
I don't know.
Who knows? The Dalai Lama.
Is he allowed to
knows.
like it?
Unless the Dalai Lama hasn't even seen it.
Well, that might be possible.
Dalai
No,
Lama's like,
he's
Scorsese's a Catholic. I don't like that guy. We didn't really talk about that much, how like it's interesting seeing somebody who is like essentially a devout Catholic, going on a deep dive into religion, and a person that it's a Christ equivalent tackling that material.
I think that it's because at the end of the day, like the basis of all religions is relatively like the same, or like you want to release good onto the world and you want to be good to yourself and others at the base. I'm not saying that the shit that they built out of that isn't different, because it definitely isn't now. But so I can sort of see how if you've gotten to that level of like, all right, like it's not just Christianity is what I believe, then you can more authentically start taking in this. So I think maybe Scorsese probably felt like, I don't want to say honored, but it's got to feel like a little good when like it's almost as if the Dalai Lama himself was like, hey, make this movie about me. Almost. I know there's another hand extended there, but like it's not that far removed from the Dalai Lama.
Interesting if the Dalai Lama was in charge of his own movie.
I don't.
Like,
I wouldn't. I think I would end up liking it less.
I was gonna say I think that'd be a little facetious. I think that'd be weird.
I mean, that's like anybody doing
autobiographies are lame.
Yeah.
I know that.
There is a documentary about the making of
It's
the
on
movie.
YouTube.
It is.
Yeah, I saw that.
It says
was on
that
YouTube. There's a horrible Conan O'Brien interview about it.
Oh my god.
well, there's a point where he spends time with the Dalai Lama himself. Scorsese does.
Ooh.
So now I kind of want to watch that if only for that.
Yeah.
And it's 85 minutes, so that's not much.
It's not too terrible. This movie didn't get nominated for anything at the Academy Awards, did it?
Mm-hmm.
Really? Okay,
It-
like costume design or things like
It
that?
had
Production design?
4, I'm pretty sure.
Is it Dante Ferretti again?
Hold on. Slow down. You're going too fast. Well, Dante whom?
Dante
Ferretti?
Ferretti?
Ferrari.
Yes, it was. So it got nominated for Best Cinematography,
The Deacons.
Best Art Direction, Set Direction, Dante Ferretti and Francesca Lo Schiavio. Best Costume Design, also Dante Ferretti. And then Best Original Score for Philip Glass.
Nice. But it didn't
And,
win anything.
It didn't win anything. That was the year Titanic.
Oh,
so
boy. Yep. The
Titanic
sweep.
won
Rough go.
goddamn like everything.
Oh, but
Um,
he saw Leo that year and was like,
It's you.
I wonder.
I doubt
I
it.
mean, it's only
He'd
two.
been-
isn't
I'm
it
sure he'd
only
been
2
seeing Leo
movies later?
forever.
Sure.
I think De Niro's actually the one who introduced him to Leo.
Oh, yeah, because like
This is my
boy's
son.
life or whatever.
Mhm, yeah.
They were in a movie together when Leo was young. De Niro plays his like dickhead dad.
And I think that I remember seeing an interview with Scorsese talking about seeing him in What's Eating Gilbert Grape as well.
His best movie.
But we'll talk about
I've
that.
never seen it
later.
actually.
It's the one he should have won an Oscar for. At least in my childhood brain.
I'm
I
not.
need to see it again. I don't know if it's offensive or not, but I remember
Well,
it being
okay,
very
let's be real.
authentic.
Probably a little offensive. Whenever, I don't know. I always feel weird about, what's I don't know, like special people not being played by special people. So like sometimes it's okay. Sometimes I feel weird about it. I always feel weird about it, but sometimes I'm like, okay, like I guess I get why you didn't do this.
I
But
mean,
also,
you just said he should have won an Oscar.
ooh,
You.
DiCaprio. And
For
you did
that.
just say that.
yeah, that's what I said. Well, he said that it might be offensive, and I was like, well,
I was like, I
more
haven't
than
seen it
likely.
long enough to be able to determine.
I understand.
But,
I remember
you know.
thinking it was good.
You had time travel back in that?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Kundun. Oscars.
What's the budget?
Budget at the time was $28 million, which today is 44.7.
That's low for Sassy.
And it only made 5.7, which is
Damn,
9.1.
big old flop.
Yeah, that's a big flop, like
Big old flop.
$30 million flop.
I mean, he makes a lot of money on the next one, I'm pretty sure. So.
$30 million.
Or no,
in
not Bringing Out the
today's.
Dead. Gangs of New York, sorry.
Oh yeah, I don't know anything about Bringing Out the Dead. Actually,
Me
really.
either. We'll talk about it next week.
Yeah, we will.
But I mean, I guess more or less the biopic complaints on my end, just to sort of wrap that end up, like it's just the matter of it feels like it's hitting beats, and like while yes, I do think that it hits those points that you were talking about, where it does cover some of the more humanistic elements of the Dalai Lama's existence, especially leading up to his rule and like ultimate like conflict with China. I think it doesn't luxuriate in the points enough to get me as invested as I was hoping I'd feel by a certain point in the movie. And maybe there is a certain detachment because of the fact that these are non-actors. And, you know, I think that it is necessary because it totally lends to the authenticity of the experience. But I think the same thing even goes for movies like Bresson's movies, where he uses virtually only non-actors in most of them, where there is this detachment because it's not the same as a normal traditional movie experience where you are watching actors who are experienced in performing and pretending and emoting and building a character, whereas, and I mean, like, if you think about it, these non-actors are given the ultimate gift of the actor's director, Martin Scorsese, to guide them through this experience, and that's why I think that probably they all end up playing well. Like, I don't think there's a single performer that is consistently bad in the movie. If anything, there's only ever moments where I'm like, ooh, I don't know if that landed, or I don't know if that landed, but I think that doesn't play into the biopic part of it at all, but I think that may have played into the things that made me detract from loving it more. But I think that also, to say the thing that we say every episode, falls under the category of personal preference too.
Everything's personal.
And I don't know, because I don't think this is boring, but I just don't know how much value there will be in returning. But like you said, I'd rather see the making of documentaries and like documentaries about the Dalai Lama and look more into the story. And if anything, Kundun was a perfect jumping off point to do something like that.
Yeah, which is why, it might make you want to read a book or maybe watch a more streamlined version of like, well, what is the Dalai Lama? Like, things like this can open doors. Like, I'm definitely a little bit more curious. I was waiting until like after we talked about it more on the pod to like really like not die, but just sort of get a little bit more into like Tibetan history and stuff. Because I really, I knew what Tibetan monks were, but I really didn't think about that whole chunk of land not just being China, and how Tibet is a thing, and how
It
it's
takes
still
up a whole quarter of China
Yeah,
if you
like
count
a-
old Tibet too.
yeah, like it's a lot. Like it is a very decent amount of the Chinese continent. And so, I definitely want to learn a little bit more about that, because it is like literally, because from at least from what I've seen, like, because they're not fighting back, like it is just like they are just taking it. And it's like, how does that work? How do you just do that?
And
then
how come it's been such an
Yes.
ongoing thing?
But watching the movie that we watched yesterday actually did give me a bit of an idea of just like, you just do it. That's how you do it. You just fucking ravage the land and you keep it moving and you don't think twice. It's fucking crazy. It's fucking crazy.
It's fucking crazy.
That's fucking crazy.
Thank you, Bong.
Bong rip.
Rips to the bong.
Yeah.
The value that comes for me more than anything is the Scorsese stuff. And I think that also plays into the bias of the fact that we're watching and learning about Scorsese. So not only am I learning about the Dalai Lama, but this is part of my education on him as well.
Mhm.
Him being the ultimate him.
Mhm.
Scorsese.
De Niro.
But Joe Pesci. But I think that he is particularly noted here in that I think this is a very interesting mark for him in his career. Like, I think this is something that people should pick up on and look at. Like, I'd even almost say more than Last Temptation of Christ. Like, if anything, this takes the mantle over that for me.
This movie has definitely make me gain a lot of respect.
Right.
I've already respected him as a filmmaker, but I think this has moved more so just to in a humanity sort of way. Just like, damn, you really are like a good person. I'm sorry for questioning you for so long, Mark.
Yeah. And
But,
in that,
he's a good guy.
I feel relatively indifferent about the way that the narrative was executed in both this and Last Temptation of Christ. However, I'm definitely way bigger on the style here and way bigger on the presentation of something that Scorsese is not familiar with, though, like you said, Brandon, through the broad scope of religion is familiar with.
Mhm.
And he can put himself into it that way and explore something and learn something new. And Scorsese is not only teaching us, but he's learning himself, probably.
Yeah.
So,
That's the Alice Doesn't Live Here anymore.
I was
Yeah.
literally gonna name drop it. Good shit.
another movie that I think is one of his stronger, not him movies, for lack of a better phrase.
Like most detached Ceci.
Yes, the most attached Cessies. Even though this is probably his most attached.
Yes? Maybe Cape Fear.
Maybe. But Cape Fear's barely detached at the end of the day.
Exactly.
Nah, he
That's
makes
why
it
it's the most attached.
he almost makes it literal with Nick Nolte's character, but that's fine.
I definitely think there's a lot of value in this existing, and I'm glad it does, and I'm glad I watched it, And that's what I mean, talking about it, I'm only remembering it fondly, but just it was while literally watching it, I felt myself slipping of am I about to fall asleep? Do I even, it was the middle of the day when I watched it too. I was not tired. I was not anything. So the first 40 minutes, I think or 50 or whatever, I messaged you guys multiple times. This is fucking weird, but I'm fucking in it.
Yeah.
And
It's an interesting movie, no doubt.
I do-
Despite the fact that interesting is kind of almost a negative word to use, I think. But I
think
use
so.
it in the positive sense.
Yeah. I just don't, I feel like it didn't provide anything for me to latch on to really dive deep into exploring outside of just learning more about the Dalai Lama, which it did make me want to do. So, and if that is probably the inevitable goal, you did it. Good job. But, when I'm the most affected, it's because I have a million thoughts that the movie provoked or things I'm going to carry with me further. And if anything, this maybe got that conversation going, and that's absolutely valuable. But at the same time, as a movie, I think it ranks, lower than most of his things that we've watched this far.
Yeah.
I'd say what I will say for sure is that I think any sort of rewatch for me anytime soon, the movie would be boring because the learning aspect is sort of gone.
Yeah,
and then
give me
it would,
5 years.
and
Give
it
me 10
would
years.
just be watching the life of the Dalai Lama. But I think the thing that I really am latching on to, and the thing that sort of helped me gain even after watching what has helped me appreciate it so much, is how this is about something and sort of relates to the movie that we watched yesterday, that this is about something that I had literally like no clue about, like the China overtaking of Tibet. Like that is a whole, like, that is entire, like, massive history in the world that, like, I was unaware of. And that's not the only thing that I'm unaware of, but every time that I've come across something where I'm like, this is major and I didn't know about it, like, I latch onto it. It fascinates me. And so not knowing that something like to me, this is a humanitarian crisis sort of deal, where it's like these peaceful people are being like they're to the point where they are lighting themselves on fire in the streets in protest of, like, don't take our land. Like, why do you even want to? It's because they want it. And it's like that's something that I latch onto. I'm like, this is a crazy event that's still ongoing that I had no idea about. And
That's
it's
why
not
I
something
wanted
that
2 movies. Kun and Dun.
Kundun.
Kun and Dun.
Oh wait, Dune's coming out later. You're
Dune is
good.
coming out later, yes, but we don't have Kun yet.
Kun will be the prequel.
Cocoon.
What am I supposed to do with that?
Cocoon Dun.
Well, I was on good points.
Cocoonba.
Yeah, you were. I understand
You like those
that.
segues?
I just don't like, I feel like this movie deserves more things said about it. But I just know I'm not the person to say them, and I feel
Well, I think that's
saddened by that almost,
Well,
because
me
like we're probably one of the few people who have sat and been like, all right, we're gonna talk about Kundun in length, and
maybe this would have been an appropriate episode for a guest, as in we should have called in a Dalai Lama expert to bring in a bunch of elements.
We
and
should have just called in the
information.
Dalai Lama. If he can meet in like Idaho to do yoga with Lady Gaga, he can fucking come over here.
Indianapolis, I think.
Sure.
It's wild.
Are you about to fact check me? Because that did happen.
Look it up.
They met about yoga and talked. In like 2011 or some shit.
Good for them.
But anyway, like I think that the idea that we don't know much about the Dalai Lama says something about why we don't have as much to say. But then I also think that adds to the quality of Kundun being lesser than some of the other sessis, in that, yes, it's respectable that he'd tackle material like this, and I think that he does so respectfully, like, which is even better. But I don't think that emotionally or like whatever element it might be, I think it's mostly emotional for me. It just jives in the same way that some of his other work does. And I think that the fact that we don't have as much to say about the Dalai Lama, even in knowing more about the general scope of what he was or who he is and what happened to him and the history of China and Tibet, like, we definitely could say more, but I definitely think that there is far more that we don't know, I'm sure. But that's also a guess if you're really breaking it down. But that element of it speaks to why the movie doesn't click as much, I think. Like, if the movie had taught me a bunch and I was able to sit here and talk for the same length that we talked about movies like Casino or Goodfellas or whatever what have you, I'd feel a bit more positive on the love front. Whereas I'm definitely more neutral on it's a fucking solid flick, man. Like, definitely check it out. Worth seeing, no doubt. And it's an important movie to watch just in the scope of you should learn about the Dalai Lama. But there are other ways to do that than watching Kundun. Is this the ultimate way to learn about him? I would probably say that it's definitely not, but I couldn't say for sure.
I mean, it's
Because I
not.
don't know the other forms.
I mean, it's not. There can't be the definitive way of learning somebody when you only get 23 years of their life, and they're like
in 2 hours.
They're like in their 80s right now or something,
Right.
But the more that I've talked about it, the more I love it even more. Like, I think it's gonna be the next like 5 or Sessi, where I'm just like, this movie is fucking dope, and I think that it could be very important if it got the attention it deserved. I think if more people fucking caught on to the shit that was going on in China and Tibet earlier, then maybe who knows what could happen, because it shows at multiple points in the movie that the Dalai Lama have reached out to multiple countries like, hey, please help. Hey, please help. And all of them are like, we're already fighting. No help. No help. No help. And it's like the power that the fucking media and shit has today, like, who knows where, relations would have been right now. I mean, probably nowhere. China is like a fucking powerhouse, which is why we were ignoring the Dalai Lama in the first place, which is like another thing I was thinking about. I was like, goddamn, like, even like the sort of implications of the power that China was already amassing is already there. Because when he said that the Americans didn't answer him back, I was like, oh, that kind of makes sense. This is like sort of like the start of when we started this fucking $1 trillion debt that we're in with them. At least I think so. Like it started making sense. It's like, oh, we don't fuck with China. Like that's one of the countries we don't fuck with, which is like more so Russia now, but we still don't fuck with China. Like it's like we definitely want to be in like not like your good graces, but we definitely don't want to be in your bad graces.
Yeah.
So, it was also interesting that it made it. I think that the movie definitely, I'm giving it sort of the Goodfellas treatment where it's like, and the Last Temptation treatment where it's like the afterthoughts of this movie and sort of the things that are branching out of it, I think are really, really cool. And I think that that's something that's going to stick with me more so than, sure, like the linear story of like the Dalai Lama. But, the movie is to blame for that. So I'm going to give it the recognition it deserves. I love it. So let's be blunt.
I think you were just a little blunt.
I mean, I was. I'm sorry I was a little early, but it's just like
No, it's good.
I love it.
So then what are you thinking?
Well, obviously,
What do you grade it and what are you thinking?
So I think the final grade is going to be the full 5-star. The full 5-star.
Wow.
Because the only other one that I've given 5 stars is After Hours, and I was like, thank you God for like the break of just like the asshole.
Yeah.
That's what I want. I'm like, God, this is much less of an asshole, and at least like the whole movie he's getting shitted on opposed to like waiting for something bad to happen. Like please fucking punish this man so I don't have to feel so conflicted. Where oh fuck, I'm forgetting the guy's name in After Hours. Paul Hackett, where it's like pretty much at every turn, Paul Hackett's getting fucked up. It's like, haha, this is what you get, you horny boy. But I'd say that Kundun, and sort of like relation to that is like, it's like, ooh, this is like to me feels like my like final recognition of like Scorsese. Like there's nothing like now. I don't think there's gonna be more. It's gonna be a lot more questioning of filmmaking as opposed to questioning of intent. I think from this point on. And I think that that's a significant change for me personally.
I did want to say earlier, and I just remembered, thank you, that I think this is a very clear, like, change of chapter in Scorsese's career. Like, looking at like, something like Casino being, like, the pop-off of all pop-offs of this excessive style that he's been running with for, like, 15 years and, like, developing his brand, and Casino being the most like on brand Scorsese movie ever, to have this be the complete 180. And then I know he has like this weird follow up with Bring Out the Dead, which all I know is that it's another religious dealing with movie, obviously more from the American Christian perspective. And then he enters the Leo period. And it's like, I do think this is important in his development. Absolutely. And I respect that, but so this means this is your second favorite Scorsese so far?
I don't even know if it's my second favorite. It's just the second one that's been rated 5 stars. Okay.
So your listy's gonna be all over the place at the end of this.
Who knows?
I'm excited to look at that. So do you think it belongs in the canon?
I would put it in the canon for importance, but I understand as like a why. I mean, because you guys have talked about it, I understand why as a movie you wouldn't, even though as a movie I would. On both levels, because it's like it's good and it's important. I just think that it might not touch everybody because it's hard. It's like what you guys said with Age of Innocence. It's gonna be a little hard to relate to, a little hard to be like attaching onto these things that you're so far removed from, and it's hard if you can't if it doesn't get you, then like it's gonna be hard to keep you, which is what happened with me with Age of Innocence, and that's not in the canon.
I mean,
so
I
understand it's got to be unanimous.
I'm the no on
Okay.
this one, only because we did not vote in Last Temptation, and I know that you had said that we should have retroactively, like, well, not only, but I think that that's definitely one of the, if not the biggest determining factor for me, in that like we've talked about importance not just to the world of cinema, but the importance to Scorsese's career, and I think again the personal preference comes in because I think it's amazing that it had that impact on you in that way, but it just did not have that impact on me at all. Like, I would not deem this to be one of the most important movies ever made by any stretch, and I wouldn't say that this is something that is necessary viewing. I would say it's necessary to learn about the Dalai Lama, and this is the only source that I've seen to really provide any sort of extended information, but that's also by proxy of the fact that I'm, one, ignorant, and two, it's because Martin Scorsese made this movie. So, and I also don't think that as far as Scorsese is concerned, it's an interesting landmark in his career for sure, like in the sense that it it's a diversion from the norm of his like typical obsessions. Like the religious stuff and the political stuff is here, and they're changed and morphed into the Buddhist and Chinese perspective, which is something we have never seen from Scorsese. So I think that is certainly the new avenue. But I don't know if it's necessarily as assured as something, even like The Last Temptation of Christ.
Oh, I think
but
this is way more assured than that.
I think assured in style and filmmaking, but I don't necessarily think assured in knowing who this guy is and knowing what this world is. Like, I feel like when I watch Casino and I watch Goodfellas, I'm watching a movie made by somebody who understands what this world is. And I feel like I am actually learning by proxy of just being privy to it through the eyes of somebody that understands. So I kind of have this innate understanding by the end of the movie, right? Even I can't put or articulate that into words. Whereas with this, I'm not necessarily convinced that Scorsese is an expert in the Dalai Lama by any stretch, and I don't think that he is teaching by example of expertise. He's teaching by example of being essentially a peer, probably, because I don't know, and that is the one thing that I am assuming. So you can fact check me or contact us at thechroniccanon@gmail.com or follow us on Twitter and message us there to yell at me about how I'm wrong and that Martin Scorsese had done extensive research on the Dalai Lama and it was his college thesis and he had all these things and it was the reasons, but I don't remember ever reading anywhere that was a thing. So that's my assumption.
It's just like, why does Martin Scorsese have to be a Dalai Lama expert in order to give the movie merit?
I'm not saying it doesn't have merit. I'm just saying that I would have preferred a Tibetan filmmaker had made this movie. I'd have preferred somebody who was, because like if I think about it too, the people that he cast in the movie, like even one of the actors who I believe was the teenage Dalai Lama ends up becoming a monk in real life.
That's the little boy.
Yeah. Okay. So like, well, but then all of these people, according to Scorsese, in the one interview that I watched, were affiliated to the Dalai Lama in some way, in that they're Tibetan people. Like if you're a Tibetan, you automatically are entrusted to the Dalai Lama, right? Like, or you are indebted to the Dalai Lama. I think that's the idea of being a Tibetan person. But I don't know if that's also the truth because I am white and not Tibetan. So
yeah, I mean, I do. I mean, this is an important argument that is happening a lot in our current culture of examining art and stuff. And I don't know the answer because I see value in an outsider viewing it opposed to somebody who's just lived with it their whole life. But then, and like, could make the same argument about Last Temptation. Maybe that'd be more valuable if somebody else who wasn't so affiliated, it would be a stronger film. And I do think that Kundun is more assured, and like I like it more than Last Temptation. And in my mind, like I was like, no, I wouldn't put this in the canon. But then like hearing Brandon thinking about it, I was like, I feel like one of his religious movies should like probably.
We got one more.
I don't know if silence is going to do it for me. I think the things that frustrate me might still frustrate me. But
I'm still standing at my no, though.
Yeah, that's fine. I'm just speaking my piece.
Jeez.
I got to do that too. Don't I?
I mean, true.
Okay. Thank you. So I don't know. I guess it doesn't matter. We got the no. So
I apologize for that.
I mean, hey.
I do not forgive you, but it's okay.
Fair.
Kundun's not in the canon, but it is in the canon of my heart, the Brandon Hart canon. But it's a movie that starts with a young boy, and then it turns into a middle boy, and then it turns into a old boy, much like the movie Old Boy, another coming of age movie. Which leads me to our next prompt.
Wrong.
What are your guys' favorite coming of age movies? Mine is Old Boy.
Is that it? That's your only one?
That's the only one I can think of. I've been panicking the whole time.
That's fucked up.
I don't know.
That's my choice, or the movie is fucked up?
That's your choice.
Movie's also fucked up.
That's why it's fucked up. That's your choice.
It's also not coming of age at all.
It's coming.
All right.
Come on, one of you. What's your coming of age movie?
I asked you what your other ones were. Other than Old Boy.
Well, there's one that I couldn't find the name of, but it's very good.
Boyhood.
Is Boyhood your favorite?
No, I don't really even care about that.
That's the movie that I was very.
Well, his coming of age movie is Boyhood.
The first thing that I
It's a
thought
Red Letter
of,
Media reference.
the first thing I thought of was Stand By Me. Just because these young men do go on this sort of life changing adventure. Because coming of age to me, sort of means about like, well, in this version of coming of age, Kundun, I mean, is more so about coming into like yourself as a person and sort of realizing the world that you're in and like trying to find your place in that world. And maybe, throughout the course of this movie, you get an inkling of an idea of what that place is. So that's what I think about when it comes to coming of age movies. And I think that,
I think like the first half is that.
yeah, and it's definitely like you can't go through what those kids go through and not be just like a little bit more grounded in the reality of your existence. Like, oh shit, I could like this is I'm a breathing person. This is life, and I didn't fucking think about that when I was like 10, So I thought that was cool. Another one off the top of my head, I thought about Boys in the Hood, just because at the end of that movie, Trey definitely isn't the same. And he sees a little bit more, like he's always sort of known about what it's like in the hood, but like seeing the realities face to face with someone so close to him, you can see that he's definitely a different person, and he grows and changes, and that's something that I definitely like grew up on even. So I appreciate that as a sort of coming of age.
It starts with them as kids too for the first half hour.
Yeah, you know what? It's for a minute, yeah.
Half hour. And then it's an hour and a half of them as adults learning the reality of where they are. And it is, I think that's a very good example. Is that basically all you had though?
Yeah, I'll interrupt you if I think of something else.
Okay.
What
That's
about
fair.
you?
I mean, I feel like a couple came to mind. Miyazaki's got a lot of them. I feel like this very notion of people coming into their worlds. But Spirited Away and Kiki's Delivery Service, I think, are the two best
Literally.
examples
Yes.
Spirited Away, at the end of the day, it feels it's mostly about like learning how to work in
Kiki,
some weird
Kiki's
way.
definitely is like that
And
is
that's what it's
the coming
literally
of age
about.
story, like the coming of age
You're right.
story.
You're a
It's
witch.
just
You
like,
got to go out
you're-
in the world and
Like,
be a witch.
It's just like, wait, what? I have to be a witch? Mm-hmm. Have fun. And it's just like, look at you go, girl.
So I think those are like other movies too fit into that, but those are the best two examples. I mean, you've referenced it a few times, but I think the movie you watched yesterday, Come and See, is a really good example of it in a fucked up way, not in a fun way, but just, I mean, he's literally forced into the most adult situation in the world and he's a child.
You can literally see at the end, like even the way that his dialogue changes, how he talks to people. It's like, oh my God, I'm so fucking sorry.
Well,
kid.
it's like at the end of the movie, he theoretically should have walked away, but because he knows what it is now, he has to fight.
Right. It's very powerful and fucked up.
Yep.
So that's maybe even in a way the example, but also I'm trying to think. 400 Blows is like the classic example, right? I mean, I don't.
Well, I
even
mean,
resonate
like
with
coming
it that
into his
much.
own. I mean, like I don't know. That movie never really clicked with me when I watched it back in the day, but I've also not revisited it, so I don't know if it would now as much as it did then.
I just feel like that's the easy one.
That's the one that like critics like to jump to as being with the final freeze frame, because he gets sent to what, like juvenile hall, essentially.
Yeah, and then he escapes or whatever.
Yeah, at the beach.
That's 400 Blows.
Yeah,
Yes.
the old French movie. 59.
French New Wave, like the first French New Wave movie.
And only two more I'm going to mention real fast. The Terrence Davies trilogy, which is technically 3 short films. Like I thought about Long Day Closes, but I think that isn't that coming of agey. It's more like just remembering things. Where Terrence, the trilogy of shorts is looking at one character at 3 different points in their lives, and focusing exclusively on that portion, like as a child, as like a adult figuring out his own identity, and then on his deathbed. And it is very much in line with this, and I think that's awesome. And then like a wacky choice, The Master, which is like I mean, like I thought about it. I feel like it is in a way, in the same way that you could almost say Taxi
Be careful.
Driver is, just like it's a person adrift in the world trying to find their way and be different and grow. So it's my wacky choice. That's
Yeah.
it. That's what I got.
When I think of Travis Bickle, I think of a lost, lonely person trying to find their way. I know that's what he's doing, but he's a fucking dickhead.
Yeah, I know. I mean, Freddie's not the best, but he's definitely no Travis Bickle.
Mm.
Feel like Lancaster Dot is not closer to that, but he's not great either.
No.
But
What do you got, Jesse?
only ones I'd bring up at all would be Brighter Summer Day, the Edward Yang flick,
What's that?
4.5 hours, or is it 4 hours?
I think just 4.
But I can't remember specifically.
Kids growing up.
Is it Taiwan? Well, it's kids growing up in a very specific time and place and history. And the ending of that movie, I haven't seen it in years, and it's very long, a lot of information. But there's a couple of scenes that have stuck with me, and the final like climax and end of the film has really, really left an impression. And there was also a great scene in a club that I'll never forget. And I can't remember the singer's
The whole
name.
middle sequence, the change.
We had said that it's almost like the teenage Godfather, where
Yeah.
it's like teen gangs. Like it's literally like in Taiwan, I think it is, or something.
It is Taipei.
Taipei, that's right. I'm so sorry.
You're half right.
And they're
Wait, Taipei's in
Taiwan. Ah,
There you go.
Goes to show that how ignorant I am.
It's okay. I'm right
Was
there
correct,
with you.
corrected, and then
I
believed
was like,
the
wait,
correct-
he is Taiwanese.
still sort of correct.
Yeah, no, you were.
But it's a very epic movie in its scope and length, but it's an incredibly personal portrait of a time, place, history, and characters within it. And if anything, might even have some ties to Ceci and that sort of like living in the world and embracing the crime element of it all, and this kid sort of trying to integrate himself into that and become a man and find love and all this other stuff. It's a good movie. It's one that I've been very anxious to revisit over the years.
It's an amazing movie.
It was only rediscovered sort of within the last decade when Criterion re-released it, but it was very hard to get until they did, apparently. Something I don't think about a lot anymore.
Mhm.
When it came out, it was a big thing. And, I mean, I've said Boyhood, and I mean, that's not a movie I really like all that much, but I know that it's something that people will definitely toss around as being one of the better coming-of-age movies.
Yeah.
Didn't think we talked about Moonlight too much, but I think that tackles
Oh.
the coming-of-age idea in a very similar way to Kundun in the having the different actors at the different stages of life
For sure.
and using those specific pieces to inform where he goes later on and why those events are particularly important or those ages are particularly important. And Moonlight's a movie that's been talked about to death. Obviously, an incredible movie, an incredible effort from a very, not novice filmmaker in Barry Jenkins, but that was only, his second feature at the point?
Yeah.
So
I mean, in a
pretty
way.
crazy feat for a man to win Best Picture at his second movie with virtually no real fame in his name.
Not
So,
at all. The movie did the speaking for him.
Yes, an incredibly emotional experience.
I think that is actually a really good
Yeah.
comparison with specifically with Kundun, like in the same way,
Mm-hmm.
and both having like more being products of their environment than anything. You know?
Right.
Dude, there's even the male figure that disappears in like the second act, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Except they show you. What
Definitely more
happens to him.
prominent. With
So
the-
Chiron is the Dalai Lama. We
Yeah,
figured
oh
it
my
out.
God. We have to go rewatch Moonlight.
We
Call
re-record
Ceci.
the episode.
Call
Hey,
it.
I don't remember the Dalai Lama ever going to the beach. All right, that's enough.
We're not doing this again.
Also, I think Boyhood is appropriate in the same way of Kundun, in that I feel like that movie feels like a biopic, in
Yeah.
that it's just running down like these are the big events, and it feels, even though it's not, but it's like literally structured like
Okay.
one because
But because
they're getting
didn't have a
together.
script, right? They just wrote it every year.
Yeah.
I get
Like, what do we do?
the frustrations in that where it's like, why are you giving me a biopic and it's fake? Like this
Right.
is all made up.
It's just
The concept of that movie is so great.
it's
Like
perfect.
I just
Perfect
remember,
concept.
and I just remember Jesse, like, Lucas loved it. Friend of the podcast, Lucas,
Lucas.
loved it, and I remember Jesse very quickly being like, "This movie sucks." Like I thought it was cool, and it seemed cool. I was very excited for it, but it's not good. And,
Well, I
like,
love my boy Rick.
I still love Rick.
and I just got that's the same guy who made the Before.
Oh,
The
yeah.
Before trilogy
Which is
the
better.
way more refined version of what Boyhood does. Even
Yes.
though it's not a coming of age movie, it's a romance movie.
But
like
when
series.
when you initially told me about Boyhood, where I was like, where you were like, it's like the same kid that they're filming out throughout his like life, and I was confused. I was like, are they just filming his life? That's amazing. Like, no, it's still a movie.
That's
but-
the Up series.
yeah,
the
Seven.
Seven Up series.
There's a documentary where a guy started, Michael Winterbottom, I think.
Is that
actually.
Winterbottom?
I think so.
The guy who makes the trip and all that
Yeah.
shit? There's no way.
I'm pretty sure that's him.
The trip was that guy Fanakis?
No.
Robert Downey Jr.
No, with Steve
No,
Coogan and
Michael
the other guy.
Apted. My bad. Not Winterbottom. The guy who made like Coal Miner's Daughter and some other shit. What else? I forgot. I get that mixed up.
But regardless, yeah, a real series of movies following a person's life. like
Yeah,
you
the
say.
same group of people every 7 years he checks in and there's a new documentary. So,
When was the last one?
No clue.
the last 7 years. No,
And
hold on.
and the before series was every 9 years they'd make a movie.
Wasn't
then
it? But that wasn't on
every-
purpose, right? Like it was just like whenever they felt it.
Well, no, I think that what became on purpose after the second movie. Because if anything, the second movie probably informed the length. Like they probably just waited until they were like, this feels right, and then they made it, and then they were like, all right, we'll wait that same amount of time, and then we'll feel it out again. And I don't know how long it's been since Before Midnight. Before Midnight was 2013.
Yeah,
So
90
There was-
2022.
Did you? I feel like you mentioned something to me, like they were in talks.
Well, I'd
of-
seen an interview where they brought it up that
Yeah.
we're getting close to the point where we should start considering it again if we're going to do that.
Mhm. And the last one
Crazy! I
was
saw that in theaters. man.
last year called 63 Up. So, and the director himself is 79.
Oh, so all these people are like old as fuck now.
Yeah,
Yeah.
this started
That's
forever
interesting.
ago.
That's very interesting.
I've seen things that are like, it's.
I mean, I'm sure it's. I'm
Might
sure
vary
in
in
reality
real
it's
life
boring.
is real life's boring.
But the idea, like I really fuck with the concept, and I fucked with the concept of Boyhood, and I just remember like before I could like even want to like before I ever had the opportunity to really go see it, I had already not wanted to because I was like, man, it's a shame.
Want to talk about lengthy experiments? Let's watch John Dielman's
What's
Okay.
that?
3.5 hour movie in which a housewife over the course of 3 days does mundane housewife tasks and also turns tricks.
We've talked about this on the pod.
Yes.
Do you mean prostitution?
Yeah.
Nice.
Not like heavy duty. Like she maybe has sex with like 1 or 2 dudes a day.
Usually just like, hey, oh wait, a day?
Yeah, in at least the 3 days that are covered. From what I remember. And I also haven't seen that movie in like 4
I like how
years.
you said not like that's not heavy, but I
It's
feel
like
like
three
that's
and a half
more-
hours, but it's enthralling, man. Like you'll watch her peel potatoes and you'll cheer. You'll flip out. Like I think I've seen someone do a meme of that scene where she's peeling potatoes or something, and like she goes to pour a glass of milk or some bullshit. Like little things like that in that video of all the people in the bar watching the screen, and then when she goes like do something else, they're like, yeah! Like every time a new like thing happens, it's like, holy shit! Like I can't believe this is happening.
Hey, I mean, it sounds lit, and I'm sure I said that last time we talked
I'm
about
sure
it.
if you got real high, it'd be crazy. I might have watched it high the first time, but I was alone. It was a really, really cool movie. But that's for another time.
And that's not coming of age.
Yeah. So speaking of coming later in podcast, what do you guys watch recently? I don't fucking shit. Kill me. It's kill me now.
I've came recently, and I also watched.
I wish you were going
uh,
to say Uncut Gems, but I know you're not.
It's not Uncut Gems. I'm trying to think about someone else go. I don't, because I don't want to necessarily say come
Wait,
and
you
see.
came
Why?
recently?
You can do it.
We're going to talk about it
Are we?
eventually.
Yeah. Well, you can recommend it for now.
Yesterday I sat down and watched a little flickaroo
We have
called
to get
"Come and See"
Yeah.
by
Elam Klimov.
Elm
Elem
Ellen
Klimov. Elam Klimov.
Korshak.
Okay.
He's in the movie. Korshak is. I watched "Come and See," and
Kosik.
it is a movie. And I've sort of danced around it a couple of times during this episode, but it is a movie, oddly enough, that I can relate to Kundun in the way that it is about something that I had very little clue about, but something that is so major that I think that the world needs to know. And unfortunately, I don't think it does. It's a long movie depicting the horrors against the Belarusians by Nazi Germany, and it is definitely a coming of age movie, like we've mentioned before, but it's also just it's definitely a grueling experience, and I think that the
By
amount
design.
of the amount of things that I was able to garner from this movie was great, and it's amazing, and I think you're doing yourself a disservice if you don't sit down and watch it. It just got released on fucking Criterion. It looks better than ever. Like Jesse showed me some he didn't show me comparisons side by side, but after we watched the restored version, he showed me clips on YouTube, and I was like, God
No, that
damn.
wasn't YouTube. That was my DVD that
Oh.
I owned that I had watched. That was
And
what
let
I
me
had seen
tell
this
you,
movie as
it is
before.
a world of difference in the quality, and so like
Insane.
definitely give it a watch. Now's the greatest time for you going to see it. It's super easily accessible, and it's something that I know you don't know about, and you need to.
Just in the sake of brevity of information, 628 villages were burned to the ground by Nazi Germany and Belarusia. So that's where the context of that movie
That's
comes
that.
from.
Pop.
But Come and See is just a real good movie, not just about that specific event, but also just like war in general. Like in the idea that it covers the grand scope of like, this is a specific war. Yes, this is a specific event. Yes.
But this
But
is war.
this is the war entire. This
Right.
is the whole idea and how horrific and awful it all is. And I think like Frank has said that if you watch this before you turn 18, like no one will go to war ever.
I'd hope. I
I
hope
mean,
so
for
he doesn't
real,
watch
yeah.
that and
But
it's
then
like,
you
As
see
the
at the
Travis
end, but
Bickle reaction.
you even said at the end, like why
Because it was
why he
already-
keeps fighting.
because it was already happening. It's
But
different.
The reason even people like, well, besides the fucked up reasons why people do join the army, where it's like I have nowhere else to go, they'll take me. But like
I guess
the
we have
idea of the army is that you feel like you're fighting to protect something that is yours.
That's true.
It's not very well. I mean, it's just what you wouldn't have people to join the army
I
if
guess,
that's not the
I
idea.
guess at the very least, it would show the personal ramifications of what you are choosing to do.
Yes.
And if you still believe in what you're choosing to do, then okay, I
Because
guess.
even though I'm not an expert, if there's one thing I know about, the military and the army is that it is all about like detachment. Like you're
has to be.
you're not in there,
That's the whole. You have to be trained to
which
be
is why
a machine.
you get fucked up because it's like, oh shit, like you can't detach from murdering a family. You're just doing that, and you have to go home with it.
Yeah, it's a fuck movie.
It's a fucked up movie, but
Wow.
it's necessary. Like watch it.
Probably 5 favorite movies ever. But it's not. I mean, it's not fun, but it is important.
Kundun and See.
Hey,
Kundun.
Well, and speaking of movies like Kundun and Come and See that are underseen, I watched another underseen movie. It's
Okay.
called Duck You Sucker, and it's
Duck, you sucker.
It's a Sergio Leone's last Western, even though Once Upon a Time in the West is touted as being like his final master stroke on that genre. People don't talk about Duck You Sucker enough. And it's a movie I had never seen. I've been going through Leone's filmography, given that it is only 7 movies in length. And it's been pretty epic, pretty awesome. Been loving all of them. But Duck You Sucker was a surprisingly good entry into his filmography and possibly one of his strongest Westerns. Certainly behind For a Few Dollars More and Once Upon a Time in the West on my end. But it's very different, and it focuses on the Mexican Revolution, but it's even more focused in on this relationship between these two sort of like, well, they're like outsider characters. One's like a Mexican bandit, and the other is a IRA, which is the Irish Republican. Is Irish Republican what?
Army.
That's what I thought. The Irish Republican Army.
I couldn't think of it either.
Yeah, the Irish Republican Army explosives expert.
I was
And
thinking
so
of
he's
association.
He's got like a lot of dynamite and TNT on him, and the whole way they meet is like they meet by accident, and then this bandit is like, hey, like I can use you to rob this bank. And then it ends up that this guy's like, okay, and then they end up becoming involved in the Mexican Revolution by proxy. It's a very interesting sort of sister piece to Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, despite being a apparently in the lineage of a trilogy, the Once Upon a Time trilogy, with that Once Upon a Time in the West and Once Upon a Time in America, which circles back to our boys Bobby D, Joe Pesci, and James Woods even, which is interesting. So that'll be fun to watch eventually. But yeah, Duck You Sucker is a really great movie. James Coburn, great performance, great score by the late Ennio Morricone, or Ennio Morricone, however you properly pronounce it. We'd like to properly pronounce here in the Chronic Canon, Sessy. So that's that. Definitely go check out Duck You Sucker, Amazon Prime, and any of the films that Ennio Morricone has scored in the past. R.I.P.
Yeah.
A supremely awful loss.
Very talented fella. Have you watched The Colossus of Rhodes?
No, not yet. That was one we skipped because we started on the Dollars trilogy.
Which
but I was
makes
going to go
sense.
back to Colossus of Rhodes after Once Upon a Time in America.
That makes sense. The two that are the most different.
Right.
Just do them back to back.
Exactly.
Frank,
Uh,
give me all you got.
I can give you all I
Give
got.
me all you got.
I'm gonna cheat and talk about a TV show, even though it is just a long movie. Derek C. and Francis, I Know This Much Is True on HBO, starring Mark Ruffalo.
Yeah,
and
we talked about it in length
roles.
with Scorsese's mom.
because I kind of loved it. I made a big goof where I watched the first 2 hours in one sitting, and then I watched the last 4.5 in one sitting. I should have just did all 6.5 in one go. It's a lot. You would need a whole day, but it is clearly made to be a movie. Like if it was a TV show, it should have been much longer and been like 10 episodes and really taken its time. But as like a movie, which like I know it like it isn't, but like it is. I can't explain it.
Well, a
other
movie
than
can be 6 hours.
who did it?
Derek C. and Francis.
I'm gonna say because I've noticed at least you guys have name dropped a couple of directors that just sort of like cheat like that, where they're like, "Fine, I'll make a TV show."
Right.
But like it's
Well,
really
It's becoming the
Our
new
boy
norm.
Papa Lynch has opened the doors.
Yeah.
Lynch. You Refn, you
Refn.
said kind of does it.
Refn followed in the footsteps like hot off the heels of The Return with Too Old to Die Young, which is
Yeah.
a 13-hour, I believe, like 8-part series. Like each episode is like varies in length, like completely. He treated it like a novel where he's like chapters are not constrained to a certain number of pages. So like each episode is however long it needs to be. Some episodes are 2 hours, some episodes are 30 minutes. It's really weird. But collectively, it makes up 13 hours. And other directors have done this over the course of time. Like Rainer Werner Fassbinder has Berlin Alexanderplatz and World on a Wire. And
Yeah.
Krzysztof Kieslowski has Decalogue. And there's others too.
Right.
And will certainly come from like more from now, like too, like later on. Because TV is only dominating more and more. And streaming television is even more popular.
People want more content.
Exactly.
But this feels like a long movie where it's all telling one very connected story, kind of in a novelistic fashion, where it jumps around generations of this family. It deals with all C and Francis same shit of like having to figure out who you are, where you come from, and how you can change the present and live a better future. But it's also the most depressing thing you will ever watch. It
That's
just
all I've
somehow keeps getting worse and sadder and more, just like Jesus Christ. And I literally thought I was gonna cry every minute of the show, just like, oh, here it comes. Just like, this is a lot, this hurts, oh Jesus. But like in the end, I found it to be very rewarding and emotional and informative and worth sitting through. Like just beautifully made. And Mark Ruffalo's best performance by far. Like I said, he plays twins. One of them who has is schizophrenic. Well, they say he's just schizophrenic, but I'm like, I feel like there's a little more wrong here.
At least the way he's performing the character.
Yeah. And like that's all good and stuff, but as the other twin, I think is like his just like Jesus Christ, this is one of the best performances I think I've ever seen.
So he redeemed himself from The Light Between Oceans then.
Yes, definitely.
Good shit. We love to hear it.
I think this is, if it feels more like the other stuff. It feels like him, and it's like as epic as The Godfather, but like as intimate as his other works. It's not crime related at all. But what is it? Did I say what it's about?
Not totally.
Just real. It's a twin brothers, one of whom is schizophrenic, cuts off his hand in public as an act of God, saying he's trying to stop the Iraq war, and then they're trying to like hospitalize him. And it's about his twin brother trying to be
watch
like,
this now.
I need to save my brother, and then it's about their whole family history.
Holy shit.
Fuck, I just got chills thinking about it. It's crazy. Crazy shit.
Sounds nuts.
Every episode, I'd be like, all right, it has to almost be done. And then hit pause and like, I'm 30 minutes in. I have a whole nother half. Jesus Christ.
So it sounds
okay.
like well, you said that he's a big Fanny and Alexander fan, didn't you?
Mm-hmm.
That makes sense.
I assume there's
How does this relate to The Godfather?
As epic in scope.
Like, okay,
And
I
the-
thought you
and the
meant like
dynamic
Mark
of
Ruffalo
family.
was in The Godfather. I was like, when?
No
one ever
no.
name
I
dropped
know
that.
it was you, Fredo.
No, it's definitely more like the feel. And they're Italians, and it goes deep into Italian heritage and stuff.
Oh, now I see why you
No.
like it.
Stop doing the
That's
hands.
why you like it.
Yeah, that hurts me.
I'm sorry.
Prejudice against Italians.
She's prejudiced against
I
that.
just think it's Italians. That would go in the best movie quotes of all time.
That's
If
true.
there's
We
one
gotta
from
think about
Goodfellas,
that. Yeah,
it
we
would
gotta
be,
make a chronic
she's
canon 100 best
prejudiced
movie
against-
quotes. Prejudice against
She's
Italians.
prejudiced against that.
I think number 1 is definitely like all the way up it or some bullshit.
Something from Heat.
It's definitely a Heat line. There's no question about it.
Shut up, rep.
I
Oh,
sit
said
down.
medals.
Or it's Miami Vice. It's one of the two.
No, I like
I'm a
the
fiend for mojitos.
Ola Chica.
Ola Chica.
I like the made up one that Frank made. Why do you care what I read, lady?
That made up.
Because
Yeah, man.
No, he says basically that.
He doesn't say, "Why do you care about what I read, lady?"
We
Does
can,
he?
I have it on my phone. I can pull it up.
Yeah,
but
we've
we're gonna
done
do
this
this after we
before.
stop recording.
Yes, I'm
So
sorry.
on
Which
that
we
note,
are about
guys,
to.
we're gonna go watch Scorsese Rage the Cage.
Oh, yeah.
We're about to see
Yeah.
the cage.
Raging Cajun.
As Jesus Christ is a paramedic. In
Well, we're
New
not
York
watching
City.
The Wicker Man.
No.
Fuck.
Later.
Hey, guess what? Schrader's back. Aha. Have fun.
All right.
I'm Frank.
I'm Jesse.
And Brandon. And bye bye.
And bye-bye.
Bye bye.